Floral foam is a porous material which holds water and is designed specifically as a mechanic in arranging flowers. There are several brands of floral foam available to the florist. However, a classic brand and my favorite is Oasis. I prefer to use the standard Oasis for most everyday designs. The cell structure of the Oasis floral foam is exactly that of a flower stem. Therefore, when a cut flower stem is inserted into the foam and remains directly in contact with the foam, the stem will drink the water as if it were still on the plant. Floral foam must always be float soaked, so you're going to drop it into a bucket of water. Allow the foam to soak at its own rate. Never, ever, ever force the foam under water, because it will not soak completely and it will have dry spots inside. If a flower stem should actually hit one of these dry spots, then that flower obviously is not going to drink water and the flower is going to wilt and die prematurely. A full brick of Oasis floral foam holds close to 2 quarts of water. This floral foam contains a wetting agent that allows the foam to soak just once and hold water just that one time. So if this foam is allowed to dry out completely, it will never re-soak. Therefore, contrary to popular belief, floral foam cannot be reused. Soak only the portion you need at a time. The floral foam can be soaked in preservative solution as long as the manufacturer's directions are followed. Be sure to use the proper ratio of water to floral preservative to ensure that the preservative will add to the flower's long life and not become toxic. So in cutting the foam, you can see here that the foam is actually floating on the top now, and that shows us that it is soaked all the way through. So in cutting the foam, we will want to, I find it's best to use a straight bladed knife here. And you're going to want to just cut directly and straight through there. And you can see how it has soaked all the way through, and we have all the water inside here. So some designers do like to use a wire to cut the foam, but I personally don't really like this method, and I don't find it useful at all. In packing the container, securing the foam in, there's several different methods that we can use. What we want to do, we want to make sure that the foam extends above the edge of the container. So one of the methods is to sort of wedge it into a container. So if I was going to place it into this container here, I may take off these corner edges and then wedge that down into this container. You don't want to push too hard because you can actually collapse those water holding materials there, those capillaries inside. We can bevel the corners here, and then we can use a waterproof tape to secure that in place. This tape comes in several colors. It's available in green and in white and also in clear. If you're using this tape, be very, very careful to conceal it with your design. It's very unsightly and very much poor mechanics to leave this tape visible. So I would tape across, and using my florist knife, secure that. Typically not coming directly across the center because that's where one of our first flower placements could be placed. And we could also go around this edge. As I said, it's very unsightly to see this tape. So you would want to make sure that whatever type of arrangement you were making in a container like this, that you would want to be sure to be able to hide this. Another method is to use an anchor pin. An anchor pin can be attached. This is a little anchor pin here. This is going to hold the floral foam on this. And it can be attached with something typically called stickum. And the way that you would use that would be to take the stickum, or sometimes called floral clay, and we're going to make it into like a little snake here. We're going to push this around the end and make that like in a circle. And then I'm going to push this down into the container and twist. And these prongs here are actually going to hold the foam in place. So I could take that piece of floral foam and just, I want to cut these corners off to make it fit a little bit better, but I could just push that in and that would hold that into place as well. And then there's another method. We can actually glue the foam into the bottom of a utility container. Now, if you are going to use the glue, the pan melt glue is the preferred method. But when you're using the pan melt glue, you must use dry foam. So you're going to want to cut the appropriate size piece, and then you're going to dip the pan melt glue into the, dip the foam into the pan melt glue. And we just need a small little layer here, and then we're going to put that into our container. And we want to let it get cool just a little bit. We don't want to put it in the bucket too soon, but you want to let it cool just a little bit. Now, the way to soak this would be to place that into the bucket sideways like this, and we're going to allow it to soak the water up from one side to the other. It's so important. It's so tempting to shove this underwater, but it's so important that we always let the foam soak at its own rate. So we would just let this continue to soak at its own rate, and it will eventually soak its way up. It's really important that we always make sure that there's a space between the edge of the container and the foam to allow water to be added to the container. If I go back to this container that I wedged in here, you can see how we do have a little bit an area here in between the foam and the edge of the container. If that block of foam is solid against all sides of the container, we really need to make a little water well. And we need to do that by we could cut off a corner of the foam here, or we could actually cut a small wedge piece in. And that wedge would then allow an area. It's going to create a reservoir, and it's going to allow an area for us to pour the water in. It's necessary to have this reservoir of water around the foam to replenish the water that the flowers are going to drink. The floral foam holds a finite amount of water, and those flowers are very thirsty, and they are going to keep drinking and drinking. When adding water to this container, we always want to make sure that we pour the water into this little opening or this well here, instead of pouring it onto the top of the foam. In this way, you're going to know that the container really is full of water.